Alyssa. Thank you for joining me today to talk about the Black film history and centers. So I'm really excited for our conversation. So first, I would like to start off with you introducing yourself.
My name is Alyssa Lopez. I'm a assistant professor at Providence College. I teach history, and my research area is on Black film history in particular. I just published a book on Black film culture in New York City, like last April. So, yeah.
Well, congratulations. That's a big accomplishment. So I'm really excited for this conversation. And I like to open it up with what most impacted you about the film? What scene, what character like really stuck with you?
The film is beautiful. I think the visuals in and of itself, like the cinematography, the directing, it is a beautifully and well done film. I think my favorite scene, and something that I literally just told a colleague this the other day, the scene that I could watch 24 hours on a loop is when Sammy is playing his song in the juke joint, and you've got all of the historical and musical elements that go into what made blues music possible, right? And also powerful. It's stunning visually, historically, and also like it sounds amazing. Sammy's an amazing musician.
Oh, that's really interesting. Because I've never heard someone phrase it as like, we see a compilation of music traditions throughout time, time, forward time. And the way that you say it as it made blues possible, can you say more about that?
Yeah, I mean, I think one of the important parts of the film and what Coogler is trying to do is also talk about history, right? And that scene, it's just so front and center. I think it runs throughout the entire film. It's also a film about African American history and life in Mississippi. But it's about all of the aspects of, and it's not just like West African history and religious like cultures that are part of it, right? It's also the Asian cultures that go into like Bo and Grace sort of like also being in the juke joint, right? It's also the future spirits that Annie says are a part of what Sammy is able to do with his music. You've got this electric guitar player, you've got b-boys and DJs. Like it's just such a powerful statement on lineage and tradition that Coogler's making there, that it's just so powerful. I love it.
Right. And I love this idea of like lineage not being linear, not being just like experiencing time as like one thing happens and then another thing happens, but it's almost like a conglomeration. It's almost like a mixing pot of time that we see in that scene as being a part of that lineage of the music tradition and Sammy's and other characters' livelihoods.
Yeah.
So that was really interesting. Thank you. And so I'm curious, you talked some about, and I know your work is on this too, like the history within centers and how it is portraying a lot of things about Black life, historical Black life around migration and the false promises of liberation dreams. Like, so I think it's such an interesting moment, like where Stack and Smoke go to Chicago and Sammy's like, I heard they don't have Jim Crow up there. And they're like,
Don't believe everything. Hey, they say, don't believe everything you've heard. Yeah.
And so I think that's part of it. But then we also, speaking with Shelby earlier, we were thinking about hoodoo traditions and how that's historical, going back to like West African, and also speaking to migrations. So like you said, there is a lot of history jammed packed into centers. And so can we talk a little bit more about that? Is there a particular scene that you can think of that really spoke to an aspect that you find important in Black history?
I have three. I think I can think of three. I can think of three. So speaking on the migration element first, the scene that you mentioned where Sammy's like, tell me about Chicago, right? Like, I heard they don't have Jim Crow up there, and Smoke and Stack are immediately like, that's like, no, right? They say Chicago is Mississippi just with skyscrapers, right? And it's that scene is, again, the whole thing is beautiful, but it's Stack and Smoke in the front, Sammy's behind them, like really happy, like really excited. And as soon as they say that, he's crestfallen, right? And I just think that speaks to the realities of the Great Migration in the 19-teens and 1920s, right? And that what is considered the promised land, Chicago, New York, right? Philadelphia, Detroit to some degree, right? That they're imagined as these really liberating spaces, and that is like truly just like not the case, right? So much so that Smoke and Stack, and there's so much like foreshadowing in the film as well. When they're talking to Sammy, they say, "You might as well deal with the devil you know," right? when they're talking about coming back down. Another conversation that happens in the cars after they pick up Delta Slim on this, it's less migration and more on the like realities of Jim Crow, which I hope we talk about in a little bit as one of the horrors of the film, where they pass by essentially like a chain gang working, right, who's got this officer on a horse, like watching them, making sure they're doing their work, and he wants to stop and like he's like cheering them up, right? Like, you can do this, right? Like, you can get through this. And Sammy's like, why are you doing this? Like, why are you talking to these people? And he's like, because I was one of them. And he recounts this story to Smoke and Stack and Sammy about how him and a band were traveling around the Delta playing music, and the white officers in one particular town that they were in just arrested them, realized that they could play music, and were like, actually, what if we just put you on the road, and forced them to play music like throughout various places. They got paid a little bit, and one of his friends was like, all right, you know what, I'm gonna leave, I'm gonna start my own place, I'm gonna get out of Mississippi, I'm gonna get out of the Delta. And he happened to have just too much money on him, right? Goes to the train station, a white man sees it and goes, you can't possibly have that much money, you must have stole it, and also the white man you stole it from, you also raped his wife, right? And he gets his friend, Delta Slim's friend, gets killed. And the whole time that Slim is telling this story, the sound in the background is playing this narrative, this like the accusations that are lobbied against his friend. And it is such an intense moment for Slim. And I think what is also really fascinating about that scene is he's telling the story, and as he like his friend is murdered, he gets through the lynch mob of it all, right? And he starts singing. Right? And it turns into him and Sammy playing a song together. And I think there's this through line throughout the whole film. And we could talk about the racial tensions between like Remick as like an Irish vampire and the music he wants and what he wants from Sammy. But there's a through line that across cultures, music is healing. It's revitalizing, right? I think, which Remick is also interested in particular as a vampire. But that scene stuck out with me because he's playing with sound in multiple ways there. The third, it's not a scene so much as a theme, although something I really enjoy is the like joy and community that is also present in the film, right? Like, Hogwood and the KKK is real. Remick as this like life-sucking vampire is real, but so is like Sammy. He finishes his work, he goes and sees his mom, they're laughing, he like plays in the water with her, and she's like joke laughing, like they're having a good time. There is not an absence of love and joy in the community in Clarksdale, and I think that's so important in terms of what Coogler is trying to do, right? Because there's a way in which some Black horror films, or like Blackness in horror, where you get like, it's just racism, right? It's just white supremacy, and it's so overarching and so present that there is nothing else, and that's just not what we're getting in Sinners, right? And the juke joint is at the center of that. How many times do Smoke and Stack say, this is just for us, this is for us, this is what we always wanted to do, we control it, we have the power, and it's really beautiful and really impactful.
Mm-hmm. Oh, you said so much that
I'm
like
sorry.
really not like that really got me thinking. There was like so many times I wanted to interrupt. Just like yeah.
Please do next time.
No. Well, I want to go back. So I want to talk again about like the music scene, like where so Delta Slim, Stack, and Sammy are on their way to meet Smoke, right? And they pass the chain gang, and Delta Slim calls out to them, like, so giving them that encouragement through a hard time, through a scene of exploitation and body harm. We see that like community encouragement happening there. And I think that speaks to like, yes, there is harm being done with Black life, and there is Black joy in that community together. And so as he's then telling the story, I thought it was so powerful. And I think this can kind of go towards like the making of a horror film, the sound effects in the background. And like you can hear Delta Slim's friend being lynched. You can hear the sound like where he's choking, but you don't see it. You just see the pain in Delta Slim's face. And I just think that's so impactful for a horror film, because like I did feel my gut wrenched in that moment, just from the sounds and just from the visual of like the pain of the aftermath. And so then when Delta goes into his song, it's more like a moan, right? It's so deeply felt, right? And it's like, I don't think he was meant to sing. I think he was just moaning. And that moaning becomes a form of healing in that moment. And I thought it was so powerful that, so he's doing that moaning as a way to self-soothe in some ways. And then Stack got excited and was like, Sammy, you got the guitar, play music. Like, let's, so I just think that goes into like this communal joy as a form of healing that you were speaking to. I think that was really powerful.
And I think that you also made me remember that another point, it's also like I mentioned it, the significance of love, but it's not always just like the one-to-one, right? Like Annie and Smoke love each other, right? Stack and Mary, whatever, that could be a different but like but Smoke and Annie, they do, right? Like they have this collective loss that they mourn together across the years, right? Smoke was gone for 7 years, right? But when he comes back, like it's clear that they're still like very much in love and grieving together. And I think but that moves out into the community as well. When I had mentioned the juke joints for us, but one of the issues that Smoke has is the plantation money, right? Which is, this isn't real money. And Annie and Stack are like, if you want this to work, they have to feel welcome, right? I think that speaks to Annie as like this really important character throughout the whole film, where she's like very much grounded in this Clarksdale community, right? But I think that still that communal support, that communal love of, we need this place, right? And we need each other, that I think is so important.
Very crucial. And I also really appreciate how Sinners, and like through your reading, Sinners is fighting back a common theme within Black horror that to pull from Tananarive Dew's work, that, you know, Black history is Black horror. And so much of our work then of Black horror becomes, let's think about white supremacy as the horror. And I think that's important. That's important work that needs to be done. But I'm also, as a horror fan, tired of it. Like I want something more. And so I appreciate your reading to say, like, it's not just that. Like, we're not just getting that white supremacy is the horror. We're also seeing a communal joy that is happening, this kinship, this affinity for each other, and trying to build something that can be a long-lasting place for Black people in that community to experience pleasure, to experience this ecstasy, to experience each other in that way. So yeah, I also appreciate that. And so then that makes me want to get into, can we have a discussion about Black horror then, and like the history of Black horror? So is there a horror film or piece of literature or something that you think that this film is continuing the conversation, perhaps in the area of vampires, or any other horror production? Do you think this film is like continuing that work?
So, like Robin Means Coleman takes Black horror like all the way back, like you said, to the 19th century in literature. But I think in terms of like perhaps what Coogler is maybe directly speaking to is the race films that come out in like the 1920s into the 1940s, especially Oscar Micheaux and Spencer Williams. So Oscar Micheaux is like one of the most importantly, certainly not the only or the first Black directors in the 20th century making films for money, right? And he has a number of horror films that don't survive anymore, because that's just the nature of race films at this point and in American history, that are like, there's a haunted house story. It's called A Son of Satan, I believe, 1924. That talks about, it's like a man goes to a haunted house, like on a bed. And there's some issues of like race riots and racial tensions that I think also speak to some of the violence that we see later in Coogler's work, right? Micheaux also does The Devil's Disciple, where sort of like urban leisures are seen as they're evil in the form of like a literal demon. And a little bit later, I think, continuing that sort of like legacy, Spencer Williams kind of comes out with some sort of the first like Black horror films proper, with The Blood of Jesus, which is like very clear like Christian influences and the like the literal like good and evil, and it's like urban versus rural. And The Son of Ingagi in 1941, which is playing on the sort of like ape trope in horror films at that moment. But I think like with Micheaux, especially the themes of Christianity, hauntings. Another film that's really important for Micheaux is he actually adapts Charles Chestnut's The Conjure Woman. And so you've got the hoodoo influence as well, right? The importance of the South on Black cultural development, right? And Black cultural history. And so I think he's really, if he's not directly calling out to it, he's in this like long lineage that goes way back in terms of the significance of Black directors adding their own point of view. Black vampires come into play around blaxploitation as a sort of moving out of blaxploitation as we like understand it into like more Black power films with Blackula, a play on literally Dracula. Ganja and Hess also comes out. That's a little bit after. 1972 is Blackula. 1973 is Ganja and Hess. Bill Gunn's independent film that explores those themes, but similarly relies on Christian tropes of like being saved or being condemned. And the next one is probably Eddie Murphy's The Vampire in Brooklyn with Angela Bassett, you know. But there's a history there that he's in conversation with, but he makes some of his own with. I mean, Remick being Irish is really fascinating, and like it's not an accident, right? I think it's worth thinking about what Coogler might be trying to say about so-called affinities between like English colonization of the Irish and enslavement of African Americans in the United States.
No, I think that's so important. And I appreciate you taking us back to like, you know, early 20th century and thinking about the works that Black directors are doing to participate within the horror genre. And I appreciate you pulling up Robin Coleman to think through like how this is continuing to play in our contemporary moment as well. And is there something that Ryan Coogler is doing that, like you mentioned with having an affinity for or showing the similarities between Irish culture with the use of Remick as a vampire. And so there's that, but I'm wondering, as Ryan Coogler's continuing this work of Black horror, is there something that he's adding to it? Like what makes it a contemporary work, I guess, is what I'm saying. So like we go to like the early 20th century, we stop at mid 20th with like Blackula and Ganja and Hess, and now we're in this contemporary moment. And then we stop at the 90s as well. And now we're in this contemporary moment. Like what makes it contemporary, do you think?
I think, just to reiterate my point, and perhaps I'm interested in your thoughts on this as well, Remick being Irish. I mean, I really think that that's really unique and it is like adding to this conversation of, first of all, what is cultural appropriation, right? Like the vampire as like a life-sucking, like cultural, like appropriation force is really, it's very clear. But I really think that, again, I said earlier that, yes, there's this through line of music as healing, music as revitalizing, but Remick and Smoke and Sack are not the same, right? And I really think that's it. Like he tries to make that point over and over again, but Remick has no problem when he first runs into the Klan members when he's trying to run away from the Choctaw, like appealing to their racism, right? He's like, they've got me, they got my wife, like, please, and directly appealing to the KKK's racism, right? But then has the audacity a few hours later to say to Smoke, the only way you're going to be free is if you're with me, right? But has no problem like playing into the racism when it's the most convenient, right? He says they won't allow you fellowship. They won't allow you community. Nothing is your own. Come with me. I'll help you. And it's, but again, he has to kill them to get that, right? Yeah, I think it's really fascinating. And I think I from my own like personal perspective and like my professional, like I teach at Providence College, I teach a development of Western civilization course, and that Irish African American like connection comes up so often of like, oh, we get it, like we understand, like it's the same, and I'm constantly battling the, but no, it's not, right? And I think like Coogler is like, and no, it's not, you know, yeah.
No, you're right. You're definitely like, because I was seeing a lot of reviews too that were saying like, oh, we're seeing the like through line or some sort of cultural similarities. And I think that could be there. Like, I'm not disagreeing with it, but I do think that Remick is also thinking or exposing consumption of Black cultures. 100%. And Remick, being a white vampire, is going into this community in manipulative ways in order to consume their bodies, their music, their livelihoods, their knowledges. And so it speaks on consumption.
That's the points that you're making. I just like want to like reiterate as like super important, right? Like it's like he's literally Remick, when he finally gets his hands on Sammy, says, "I want your stories." Right? Like, I want your stories and you're going to have mine. I mean, that's the point you just made about it's not just, okay, yes, it's stealing their livelihoods. It's literally stealing their lives, but stealing their knowledge, right? Like, he's connected to all of them. Now he has it and it's his, right? It's Sammy is a means to an end for him, and it's his ancestors, right? It's Sammy's power that Remick wants, not necessarily Sammy as a human being or anyone else that he happens to like turn on the way to Sammy. But I think I wanted to just, that point that you made was so important, that it's also knowledge, right? And it's take for use, not take for, let's actually be in fellowship. Let's actually be in community with each other.
Right, exactly.
I just want to speak to, you had asked me earlier, like what is actually scary about it, scary about Sinners. And I think it's that Remick is at once, it's like, oh, it's a vampire. Like, do we really like believe in vampires? But he's actually not that much different than Hogwood. And I think that's like what's scary, right? It's like, oh, like, well, he can kill me. Like, he'll change my life, whatever. But it's like, no, he's only slightly different than Hogwood. They have very much like similar mentalities, and that stealing of a life force and like well-being and livelihood is part of that. That's what's scary.
Exactly. Like, he's a metaphor, right? For the ways in which white supremacy, white communities come into Black communities in order to seemingly well-meaning, in order to just keep taking from them. Yeah, you're right. They're doing the same thing, pretty much.
Remick just has the audacity to say that he's there to help them.
Like, join me.
Right.
I'll give you freedom. Which is so the film also speaks a lot about Black liberation dreams. And I think that's such a mainstay in Black cultural productions, something that we continuously look for within our music, our stories, our art practices, our migration practices speak towards liberation dreams, trying to find a place that we can feel liberation, feel freedom. And that's something that continuously happens within Sinners. Like, we see when Sammy's thinking about the North and migration as a form of liberation, and that doesn't happen. They're creating the space for the juke joint in order to be that sort of like place that's kind of feels free as much as they can. Yeah. And then Remick thinking like, oh, I can make you free. So it's like just the continuous play on this liberation dreams and how Remick was feeding into that, I thought was really insightful.
Yeah, and also like also trying to undercut Smoke and Stack and saying, you won't ever have this, right? You need me. You need my power. You need my whiteness to get this. And I mean, Smoke to the end being like, can I curse? Like, like you can go fuck yourself. Like, no, like I don't, right? And also the violent resistance that smoke offers at the end. I mean, that's like it's amazing. And I think again it speaks to that, saying that Black horror as Black history. It's obviously Coogler didn't do anything by accident, but it's not an accident that Smoke and Stack are veterans, right? Chad Williams talks about Black soldiers after World War I as being the vanguard of the new Negro, right? That they're helping usher in this really radical consciousness that says enough is enough, right? I literally just fought a world war for you, and you're still not gonna let me have my rights? You're still not gonna let me move where I want, use my money how I want, right? And we very clearly see Smoke and Stack as part of that. Yeah, they're gangsters before, gangsters in Chicago, but it's their experiences as soldiers, and they use that identity. Smoke says, I mean, when he's having an exchange with Sammy, like he's like, I'm a soldier boy, right? Like he means it's part of who they are, and it helps create that radical consciousness for them that they're bringing back to Clarksdale, that makes them entrepreneurs in addition to being gangsters.
Right? And like, I love that scene at the end. And it makes me think about, like, on the definition of Black horror, it makes me think about revenge fantasies and how, like, I think that that's something that comes in a lot within Black horror. I'm thinking about Blackula, for example. I think there's a lot of revenge fantasies within Blackula. Candyman, for example, there's revenge fantasies. And so I think that's something so beautiful that, and I think contemporary Black horror is really doing it well. I think I'm trying to think about a Black horror production that doesn't have an element of revenge in it and fantasizing about, and I'm taking this from a filmmaker, Bethia Negra, who talks about why she likes Candyman so much and feeling so cathartic about the revenge fantasy moments, and how meaningful that is, and how, like, that's the beauty of Black horror and something that I too want more and more. So I really love that final scene. And sometimes I watch live reaction videos on YouTube, like, so where I'm watching people watch Sinners. And there was a moment where we have the sad moment where Smoke is realizing that he just lost everybody that he cared about, everybody that he loves. And then there's another scene, like, where the Klan comes in and he just goes off on the, like, putting full military training.
He's a sniper. Like, he's got the full automatic weapons, but he's also a sniper. He's got grenade. Like, they have full on, like, war armaments ready to go because, because they're also, I think, again, that it speaks to that the horror as reality. They knew. They knew what was going to happen. Right? Hogwood said to the KKK doesn't exist anymore. And they're like, yeah, okay, sure. We're ready, right?
And they still went and got the equipment and hid it in different places. Yeah. And so, like, watching those, like, live reaction videos, I would see people, like, be so sad at Smoke and then get so excited when they see that massacre at the end. And I'm just like, oh, I wonder if this is, like, something that Black audiences want from their horror productions. Like, the sense of, like, revenging, and this is something that I'm taking from Negra's work, revenging or seeking violence against the systems that continuously violate us, continuously harm our community, harm our bodies. We are now witnessing in these grand ways, supernatural, impossible. We can't really do this in our realities, but we can experience it through watching this revenge fantasy take place and just feeling that catharsis.
Yeah. I think it's similar to that. It's revenge and to some degree survival. I was reading a little bit of Stephanie Dunning's work before I came in here, and she talks about, like, it's not just about, like, a confrontation of this. Okay, that's a scary thing, but it's also surviving it, right? Sammy survives it, but Sammy also only survives it because of the people around him.
Yes.
Right? Stack has Marion, but again, I think we don't know, but perhaps we imagine he lives a quite isolating experience. Smoke made him promise that he would leave Sammy alone, right? And Sammy also says, I don't want this. He rejects becoming a vampire, right? Yeah, that's also, I think, again, Coogler, just chef's kiss. It's just such a good movie.
Such a good movie, right? And, like, So I also want to think about vampires too, and how vampire shows up in Black imaginations and throughout Black cultural productions. And in particular, like, I'm thinking about how much fun it could be, perhaps for the actors, but also for audience as they're thinking through, like, what does it mean to imagine yourself outside of being human? And how the figure of the vampire and embodying the vampire has brought some solace to Black people, to Black imaginations. So, like, I'm thinking about, like, the Gilda stories, for example, and how, like, even towards the end, where Stack and Mary kind of like join their own coven or like do their own thing as vampires. And so I'm curious, like, do you have any knowledge or research like within Black vampire studies? Because I'm thinking with Jerry Jenkins' work looking at vampires as well. And so I just know that there are some studies and some knowledges that are being done in regarding the potentials of Black vampires or Black beings within vampires.
Yeah. I'm not familiar with the works that you're mentioning, but I think like there's, you mentioned like the idea of like vampire making it possible for you to think about like not being human. But I also think what's fascinating about it is you're immortal, right? So there's that survival aspect of it again, like the you can't kill me, right? I do in fact get to live, and I do in fact have control of my life. That's really fascinating there too, because it opens up again possibilities. What do you do if you get to live forever?
Right.
And you can't hurt me. Again, when so much of, maybe not perhaps so much, but a lot of Black horror is violence, right? But then the possibility of continued survival.
No, I think that's really important, because sometimes I think about like hearing people talk about vampires and like this act of being undead is really insightful. And I think that speaks to this, like, you can't harm me in the ways that white supremacy is used to harming Black bodies. It's not going to work this time. And that's really productive for Black imagination.
I'm also thinking a little bit about like Ganja and Hess, where like being a vampire is in some ways like freeing for Ganja, right? Like she gets to explore her sexuality. She has control over herself, right? In a way that I think maybe she like reflecting on like her relationship with her mother was like difficult for her. So yeah, I think I think and as it's been explored in films that I've seen, I think in some ways it can be liberating.
I appreciate that. And so let's see, did we talk about the Black film history, or is there more that you want to say on that?
I think we touched on all the antecedents that led up to, or the important ones, I think.
Okay, great. So was there any other things that you want to bring up?
I don't think so. I mean, like, other than the fact that like it's placed in Black film history, the history that it has on the screen, I think it also like makes history, right? The like most nominated film in Oscars history should be lost on no one, right? 16 nominations is, this film was great in all of the ways that we can imagine this film can be great in. I'm really excited.
So excited for that. That's so interesting. It really is, because it is making history. Because like, so many people are talking about this is like the golden age of Black horror, right? And a lot of people point to Jordan Peele's Get Out. And now I'm thinking like, Get Out has influenced a lot of Black horror in this contemporary moment. And now I'm thinking, I wonder what sort of pathway did Ryan Coogler just pave?
Yeah, it would also like this. What's also fascinating about Black horror is that it's like continuously genre like defying. I've been rewatching it on HBO, and it's defined as a drama and a period piece, right? And Get Out similarly, like they didn't know where to place it, right? They didn't know what to do with it, and I think that's something so fascinating about Black horror is it touches on all of these things, and so hopefully so many more pathways.
Yes, I hope so too.
Yeah.
Well, thank you so much for this conversation.
It was great.
I learned so much from you.
Great to talk to you.
Yes, thank you.